When you hit that point with your HISE projects where you need to add some scripting, you know there's features you want that can only be achieved with scripting, but you're not yet ready to start writing your own scripts, you don't want to invest the time there just yet, a good solution is exploring HISE's built-in scripts. And that's what I want to show you today. So there are quite a few scripts built into HISE, and they're quite easy to add in. And even when you are able to write your own scripts, you might still come back to these built-in scripts for certain bits of functionality. So let's talk a little bit about the scripting paradigm in HISE. And to do that, I'm actually going to open up a project here. So this is Bell and Bone. This is a sample library I created. And if you've ever used Contact, you'll know that you have 5 script slots in Contact, so you can have 5 different scripts, and you can kind of get them to communicate with each other and work together, but the majority of your scripts in Contact are just going to be one big long script, so that tends to be how you work, one massive script that does everything. In HISE, it's kind of the opposite. You'll have one big script for your main interface, so the GUI, but then for everything else, you want to break it up into lots of tiny little scripts. The smaller the better, really, because then it makes your project more modular and it makes it easy to fix problems. And if you find any bugs or anything, you can narrow it down to just one script. So when we talk about scripts in HISE, we're usually referring to MIDI processors, and that's these things with the orange squares. So these are all separate scripts within my project. So you can see there's loads of them. There are a few other types of scripts, so we have scripted envelopes, scripted effects, and scripted modulators. They're a more advanced concept, and we don't use those as often. So when you're thinking of scripts, you're probably just thinking of MIDI processors. And as the name implies, the main purpose of these scripts is to process MIDI data or respond to MIDI events, so key presses, controller information, that kind of thing. And that's how the user is going to interact with these scripts. In addition to that, each of these secondary scripts can have little user interfaces of their own, but these are only for our use as developers. The user will never see these. The user only ever sees the main interface script. So you have one main interface, that's what the user gets, that's the front end of your plugin, but then all your secondary scripts, if you want, can have little interfaces as well, which are just useful for setting various parameters, and you can link these secondary script interfaces to the main interface. So for example, this is my articulation switcher, and you can see it says articulation here, and this is my list of articulations on the front interface. So as I change through this list, you'll see this number changes here. So my main interface script is connected to this secondary script, but this is working behind the scenes as far as the user is concerned. They'll never see this. Now, the position and the order of scripts within the various chains affects their behavior and affects what they control. So this is the master chain, this top section here. So all of these MIDI processor scripts are within the master chain and they're in a certain order, but actually these particular ones, the order isn't affecting them. I haven't set anything up for that. If we go further down, so we've got a global modulation section, we've got another little script in there, it's not doing anything special. And here we get to some interesting ones. So let me just compress these. So I have a container, and within the container I have a sampler. I have 2 samplers, and I want to be able to control the tuning of both of these samplers. So to do that, at the container level, I've added a tuning script. So this just controls the fine tune, coarse tuning, and transposition. But because this is at the container level, and the container contains both samplers, this one tuning script is going to affect any samplers within the container. So it will affect both of the samplers I've got there, and if I add additional samplers, they'll also be affected. So if I'd placed this tuning script instead inside this sampler's script chain, MIDI processor chain, then it would only affect that sampler. But because I've got it at the container level, it's affecting both samplers. So just be aware when you're adding scripts that you have these sort of levels of granularity. Depending on where in the chain you place them, you'll be able to control certain things and isolate certain things. Okay, let's take a look at a really simple demo. So I have a blank project here, and I'm just going to add a sampler to the master chain. And I've already created a sample map with some trumpet sustain samples, So I'm just going to load that in. So there's just one layer of samples here. And they look like they're quite loud actually, so I'm just going to pull the volume down. Don't want to deafen ourselves. Let's just increase the release time on the envelope a bit. Yeah, that sounds alright. Okay, so we've got a sampler, we've got some sustain samples. Let's have a look at the built-in legato script. So I could add this script to the master chain and then it would affect any samplers in the master chain, but because I have this one sampler with sustain samples, I only want my legato script to apply to this sampler because I may add other samplers later with different articulations. I wouldn't want the legato script to affect those, so I'm just going to add it here within the sampler chain. Let's make that big actually so we can see it. So I'm going to click the plus button here. So that's the equivalent of clicking this plus button. They're both the same, just a different view. And here we can see the built-in script. So if you were to add a new script to write your own, you would just select script processor, and then you get a blank scripting interface. And it opens the script editor here as well. So that's how you would add a blank script processor if you were writing your own script. We're not going to do that, so I'm just going to click this X here, which is the same as clicking the trash icon here. So we'll just remove that. By the way, if you're not seeing some of these buttons here, it means you need to unlock edit mode. So just click the pencil up here so it turns green, and then you'll have access to these extra controls. Okay, so let's do that again. We're going to go to the menu, but instead of selecting script processor, we're going to select one of the built-in scripts. So we have a few here, the transposer, MIDI player, and choke group processor. I'm going to go to the hard-coded scripts menu, and I'm going to select legato with retrigger. So this script doesn't have any kind of interface. There are no controls for us to tweak. It just works. So let me show you that. I'm going to open the sampler again. So if I play, let's disable the script for now. So I'm just going to hit the bypass button there. You can also just click the orange square over here as well to bypass it. So if I play two notes at the same time with it bypassed, we hear both notes playing. And if I open the HISE controller as well, you can see the voices here. So we can see there are two voices and we hear both notes. Now let's re-enable the legato with retrigger, and I'll play the same two notes. So did you hear the first note got cut off, and we're only hearing one note, and you'll see the voices up there, it's just showing one. So that's how the legato with retrigger works. When you play one note, you'll hear it. And if you continue to hold that note down and play a second note, it's going to cut off the first note and just play the second note. Now, the sort of fade out time between the notes is controlled by the envelope. So if we increase the release time, we increase the fade out. So that's a value you can play around with depending on the samples you're using to get something that sounds more or less realistic. The built-in legato script also includes a retrigger feature, so that means if we hold down the first note and play the second note and then release the second note while continuing to hold the first note, we'll get the first note re-triggered. So it's good for doing trills and little ornaments and that kind of thing. So that's the built-in legato script. It's a very simple to use script, no controls as we saw, just drop it in and you're ready to go. So I'm going to remove the legato script and let's add a transposer. So we'll drop that one in, let's open it up. So the transposer has just one control and it allows us to control the semitone transposition. So this isn't re-pitching the note, it's not doing any adjustment to the audio, it's just transposing the incoming MIDI data. Let's make that a little larger. So I'm just going to play a middle C. And now if we transpose it 12 notes, 12 semitones, we hear it's actually playing this sample here, which is 12 semitones higher. So I'm still pressing middle C, but it's playing back this sample here. We can actually see the playback cursor up there. And you can see I've got this sample selected. Now, if you wanted to connect this to a control on the interface, that's really easy to do. So it's just like connecting any other HISE module. So we would add a control to our interface. Just zoom in on there. We need to set the range. So the transposer goes from -24 to +24. I don't want to allow that much transposition, so I'm just going to set mine to -12 and +12. So you don't have to have the full range of the control. You can limit it to whatever you like. I'm going to set the step size to 1 and the middle position to 0. Then I'm going to come up here where it says processor ID, and I'm going to select transposer 1. And for the parameter ID, I'm going to select transposer mount. Now, sometimes for this to take effect, you have to compile the script. So just in case, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to open the script. This is the interface script, and I'm going to click compile. And then I'm going to lock the canvas so that I can adjust the control. Okay, so now the transposer here should be controllable from the UI, and we can see it is, and it's got the range of -12 to +12. So that's how you connect controls on the front of your user interface to the various parameters of your scripts or any of your other modules. It doesn't have to be just scripts. Okay, let's take a look at using multiple MIDI processors together. So I'm going to just remove that knob from the interface. I'm going to delete our sampler. And I'm just going to add a sine wave generator. And I'll add a waveform generator. And I'm just going to adjust the waveform a bit. Actually, let's just see how it sounds. So I'll just mute the sine wave generator. That's okay. I just wanted to make sure they don't sound the same so that we can tell the difference. Okay, so now we've got these two different sound generators, the sine wave generator and the waveform generator. We can think of these could be different samplers with different articulations, different synth modules as we've got here, whatever kind of sound generator you want. I just wanted to have two that produce different sounds so that we can hear the difference when we disable one and enable another. So I'm going to add in the MIDI processor section, I'm going to add hard-coded script, and I'm going to go to MIDI muter. So I'm adding that to the sine wave generator's script chain, and I'm also going to add one to the waveform generator's script chain. And let's have a look at these. So I'm opening the first one. I'm going to hold control on my keyboard. That'll be command on a Mac. And I'm going to click on the second one, and that allows both to open at the same time. If you don't hold control, then clicking the second one would close the first one. Okay, so the MIDI muter is a really useful script. This is something I use in most of my projects. It's very useful when you're using different articulations in different samplers, and you want to be able to turn one sampler off and enable another, so you can switch between the articulations. So the MIDI muter has two basic controls. If we enable the first button, and I'll play some keys on the keyboard. Let me open the keyboard up so you can see that I am pressing some keys here. We don't hear anything. So this first button, this tells the script to block all incoming notes. So that's what this does. It blocks all note on and note off messages. So no MIDI notes are getting through to the sine wave generator or the waveform generator because I've blocked it on both of them. Now, there are occasions, especially with articulation switching, where you want note offs to be allowed through so that you don't get any hanging notes, but you don't want note ons to get through. So what I always do is I enable this button here, which is called Fix Stuck Notes, and this basically just allows note offs to still get through, even when the Ignore All Events button is enabled. So generally I'll put that on by default, so whenever I add a MIDI muter, I enable this button. Sometimes you might not want it, and you might run into some situation like that where you need to disable it, but generally if you just enable it by default, you're less likely to run into any issues. Okay, so if I enable the button just for the second MIDI muter, so I've turned it off for the first one, then when I play, we're going to hear the sine wave generator. Now if I turn it on for the first one and off for the second one, we're just going to hear the waveform generator. So you can see it's a really easy system for switching articulations. And it's better than just turning down the volume of the sound generators or bypassing them, because that can introduce audio artifacts, and in the case of samplers it might trigger some reloading or something where the audio engine has to reset, and it can get messy. You don't want to do that. Just use MIDI muters when you want to switch between different sound generators in real time. Now, if it's a non-real time situation, like you're loading in a different sample set, then it's fine to use the bypass and volume controls and all that. But in a real-time situation, a MIDI muter is far more efficient and is the best way to handle this kind of task. Just to round this little bit off, let's add some controls on the UI to control these two buttons, so that we have some articulation switching controls. Setting up key switches is a bit more complicated and requires some scripting, so I'm not going to go into that, but using buttons is fairly straightforward. So we'll have one button here, and we'll add another button. And I'm just going to select both of them. I'm going to come down here into the property editor, and where it says radio group, I'm just going to enable that, set it to 1. And what this does is it means only one button can be active at a time. So you have to make sure both buttons are in the same radio group, so they're both in group 1. And then I'm going to take the first button, and I'm going to set its processor ID to MIDI muter 2, and the parameter ID to ignore button. And for the second button, I'm going to set its processor ID to MIDI muter 1, and its parameter ID to ignore button. And as always, I'll just hit the compile button here, just to make sure that everything's updated and that it's going to work. So now if I open up the two MIDI muters again, so enabling button 1 disables the button in MIDI muter 1, so we hear the sine wave generator. And if I click button 2, it disables the sine wave generator and enables the waveform generator. So just a really simple way to have some articulation switching from the user interface there. Now, one problem you can run into when using the hard-coded scripts is they're not designed to necessarily work together. So they're individual scripts, they do a specific job, but if you try chaining them together, they might not work the way you expect. So let's demonstrate that. So I'm just going to delete the waveform generator. We can get rid of these buttons now as well. And I'm going to remove the MIDI muter. So we just have our sine wave generator. And I'm going to add an arpeggiator. So we'll go to the MIDI processor section for the sine wave generator, hard-coded scripts, and we'll add an arpeggiator. And the arpeggiator has quite a detailed user interface. And as we've seen with the other examples, you can connect controls on the front of your interface to the arpeggiator if you want as well, to give the user control over all of these parameters. So I'm just going to hold down a key and we'll hear the arpeggiator in action. Let's just make some adjustments here. Okay, so nothing too exciting, but we've got a little 4-step arpeggiated sequence there. And now I'm going to drop in the transposer script after the arpeggiator. So let's open that up as well. I'm going to play around now with the transpose value while holding down the note, and let's see if it does anything. So hopefully you can hear that is making no difference at all. And we can even place it before the arpeggiator in the chain, so put it above it. And we'll do the same thing again. So you can see that these two scripts are not designed to work together. The transposer and the arpeggiator are totally separate. They're living in different worlds, so even though we're chaining them here, they're not designed to work together, so they don't work together. And this is where we hit the real limitation of the hard-coded scripts, the built-in scripts. It's that they can't be edited to add this kind of extra functionality. So if we wanted a transposing arpeggiator, we'd have to get into some custom scripting. We've hit the limit of what's possible with the built-in scripts. So there are a few solutions to this kind of issue. So the first solution, of course, is you can hire a scripter. Now that can be expensive for non-trivial scripts, and you might have some wait time as well, not just for them actually writing the script, but many scripters are booked months in advance, so you might have to wait on them. But hiring a scripter is a guaranteed way to solve this kind of problem. The next solution is to use a script that somebody else has already written. So there are plenty of script examples on the forum. Just go on the forum and search, and if somebody's posted something related to what you're doing, there might be a script there already for you. Now, usually when somebody writes a script, it's tailored for whatever specific situation they're in, so it might not be 100% what you need. But little simple changes, like maybe it just needs a number changing here and there or a bit of text, that's the kind of thing you'd probably be able to do even if you don't know how to write scripts. You can go in and say, oh yeah, okay, that 3 needs to be a 4 for the thing I want it to do. So don't be afraid to just experiment and try things out and see if you can tweak existing scripts to get the behaviour that you need. And of course, if you are getting scripts from the forum, there's a good chance that the person who wrote the script is still an active member, so if you do need some adjustments that are beyond your capabilities, you can always just add a post to the forum and see if the original scripter or somebody else is able to help you make the little tweaks and adjustments that are needed to get the script to do what you want for your project. And the last solution is to write your own script. So if you have the ability, knowledge and skills to write your own scripts, that's going to give you the most control over your project, and it'll give you a deeper understanding of your project. Because if you just hire somebody to write a script and you don't fully understand that script, then you're not truly in control of everything your project's doing. You're still kind of at the mercy of the person who wrote the original script. But if you're able to write script yourself, then you can get any kind of custom behavior that you need. I'm going to post another video in a couple of days, so keep an eye out in your inbox for that. And in that one, I'm going to show you how to bring scripts provided by the HISE community into your projects. So leave a comment below this video and let me know if you're already using the hard-coded scripts in your projects, or if there is some feature that you think should be made into a hard-coded script and be provided as a standard built-in script in HISE. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back again soon.